1st May, 1945, Camp Clinton, Mississippi. The midday sun beats down on the dusty road leading away from the barbed wire fences, casting long shadows from the armed American guards flanking a small group of women. These are Wehrmacht Helferinnen, German, female auxiliaries, captured in the crumbling ruins of Europe, now stepping tentatively onto a bus bound for nearby Jackson. Their uniforms, faded and patched, hang loosely after months of rationed hardship. Whispers ripple among them, tales from Nazi propaganda of savage American captors, chains and forced labor in barren wastelands. Yet here they stand, unbound, hands free to clutch worn satchels. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel for more untold stories like these. The engine rumbles to life, carrying them past green fields untouched by bombs, toward a horizon of unfamiliar prosperity. One woman, Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffman, grips the seat, her eyes widening as the first city buildings emerge. Towering structures, cars zipping freely, shops brimming with goods. No ruins, no fear in the streets. The shock settles in, a quiet unraveling of everything they believed. This unexpected glimpse into enemy soil would challenge their loyalties, reshaping views forged in war's fire. By early 1944, the Second World War had carved deep scars across Europe. The Third Reich, once an unstoppable juggernaut, staggered under mounting losses. The Eastern Front bled German forces dry as Soviet armies pushed west after Stalingrad's fall in February 1943. In the West, the Allies prepared for a massive invasion, with D-Day looming on June 6, 1944. Germany's manpower dwindled, forcing the Wehrmacht to rely heavily on auxiliary units, including women. Known as Wehrmacht Helferinnen, these female volunteers, numbering over 100,000 by 1944, served in non-combat roles: nurses, communications operators, and administrative staff. They worked in field hospitals, signal stations, and command posts, often near front lines in France, Belgium, and Germany. Clad in gray uniforms with eagle insignia, they were fiercely loyal, shaped by years of Nazi indoctrination, promising victory and warning of merciless Allied captors. The Allied advance in 1944 changed everything. Operation Overlord unleashed American, British, and Canadian forces onto Normandy's beaches. By August, Paris was liberated, and German defenses crumbled. Among the chaos, thousands of German personnel surrendered, including auxiliaries. On July 15, 1944, near Caen, a group of 23 female nurses, including Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffman, was captured by the U.S. 1st Infantry Division. Exhausted and surrounded, they expected execution or torture, fed by propaganda depicting Americans as barbaric. Instead, they were disarmed, searched, and marched to makeshift holding areas. The Geneva Convention of 1929 mandated humane treatment for POWs, and the U.S. adhered strictly, male or female. These women, ranging from 19 to 35 years old, were processed alongside male prisoners, their identities verified through papers and insignia. Across the Atlantic, the United States faced a unique challenge. By late 1944, over 370,000 German POWs filled camps across rural America, Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and beyond. The influx included a small but notable number of women, fewer than 1,000, mostly nurses and signals staff. Unlike Europe's ravaged landscapes, America's heartland was untouched, its economy booming with wartime production. The War Department established camps like Camp Clinton, Mississippi, designed to hold thousands under strict but fair conditions. Barbed wire enclosed wooden barracks, But prisoners received food, medical care, and clothing, luxuries unthinkable in war-torn Germany. The decision to transport female POWs overseas was pragmatic. It eased pressure on European holding facilities and leveraged America's vast resources. Yet these women carried heavy burdens. Propaganda had painted America as a land of chaos, its people cruel and its cities decaying. Many, like Hoffman, a 27-year-old nurse from Hamburg, believed they'd face chains or worse. Their journey began with a grueling Atlantic crossing in converted troop ships, guarded by U.S. military police. Seasickness and fear mingled as they sailed toward an unknown fate. Docked at ports like New York, and then moved by train to camps deep in the South or Midwest. Arrival brought the first shock. No shackles, no immediate brutality. Instead, they faced curious stares from American guards and structured routines. Roll calls, meals, and assigned tasks like laundry or farm work under the POW labor program. The stage was set for a profound collision of worlds. As these women settled into camp life, their expectations, rooted in years of wartime hardship and propaganda, would soon face the reality of America's abundance and order. The journey from Europe's battlefields to America's heartland was a disorienting odyssey for the Wehrmacht Helferinnen. By late 1944, after weeks at sea, the captured German women disembarked in ports like New York or Norfolk, Virginia. The sight of towering skyscrapers or bustling docks, untouched by war's destruction, jarred them. Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffman, among the group processed at Camp Clinton, Mississippi, later recalled her disbelief at the endless rows of cargo, crates of food, fuel, and clothing, stacked along the piers. For women accustomed to rationed bread and bombed-out cities, this abundance felt surreal, almost menacing, as if confirming propaganda's warnings of American excess. Trains then carried them inland, rattling through landscapes of sprawling fields and small towns far from the rubble of Berlin or Cologne. Camp life followed strict routines under the Geneva Convention. At facilities like Camp Clinton or Camp Ruston, Louisiana, female POWs lived in separate barracks, their days structured around roll calls, meals, and labor assignments. The U.S. War Department, anticipating propaganda value, ensured decent conditions, 3 meals daily, often including meat and vegetables, compared to Germany's wartime starvation diets. In 1944, a Red Cross inspection noted that German POWs, including women, received 3,000 calories daily, more than many civilians in Europe. Tasks varied. Some women worked in camp laundries, others on nearby farms, harvesting cotton or pecans alongside male prisoners. Pay, per Geneva rules, was modest, 80 cents per day in scrip. But the work was orderly, not punitive. Yet the women's mindset was shaped by fear and suspicion. Nazi propaganda had drilled into them images of American cruelty, stories of prisoners chained, starved, or worked to death. Many expected torture or public humiliation. Instead, they encountered young American guards, often farm boys from nearby towns, who treated them with a mix of curiosity and professionalism. Language barriers persisted. Most women spoke little English, but interpreters, often German-American soldiers, bridged gaps. Tensions occasionally flared. Some prisoners, fiercely loyal to the Reich, viewed cooperation as betrayal. Others, like Hoffman, began questioning their indoctrination as they observed the guards' relaxed demeanor and the camp's efficiency. The idea of supervised outings to American cities emerged as part of the POW program. By 1945, with Germany's defeat imminent, the U.S. Army allowed select prisoners, including women, to visit nearby towns under guard to demonstrate American life. These trips, carefully controlled, aimed to counter Nazi narratives and showcase democracy's prosperity. For the women, the prospect was terrifying, yet intriguing. They anticipated hostility from civilians or propaganda displays meant to break their spirit. Instead, they were issued clean dresses, not uniforms, for the visits, a detail that stunned them. The War Department's records from 1945 note that such outings, though rare for female POWs, were logistically planned, with military police, ensuring security and local communities briefed to avoid incidents. As the women boarded buses for places like Jackson, Mississippi, or Shreveport, Louisiana, they carried a tangle of emotions: fear of the unknown, loyalty to a crumbling Reich, and a flicker of curiosity about the enemy's world. These outings would soon confront them with a reality that no amount of propaganda could have prepared them for: a collision of their wartime beliefs with the undeniable evidence of America's untouched vitality. The Wehrmacht Helferinnen carried personal stories etched by war's brutality. Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffmann, a nurse captured near Caen in July 1944, had tended wounded soldiers under relentless Allied bombings. Her letters, later archived in Hamburg, reveal a woman torn between duty and despair, believing capture meant death or enslavement. Like her, many female auxiliaries were young, some barely 20, shaped by Nazi ideology and family expectations. In American camps, their initial fear gave way to confusion. The absence of chains, the provision of warm meals, and even small gestures, like guards offering cigarettes, clashed with their expectations of cruelty. Red Cross reports from 1945 note that female POWs at Camp Clinton expressed disbelief at receiving medical checkups, with one noting, "In Germany, we starved. Here, they feed us better than their own." This kindness stirred guilt in some, who felt they were betraying the Reich by accepting it. Yet, for others, it planted seeds of doubt about the propaganda that had defined their worldview. The capture of female auxiliaries was a byproduct of the Allied tidal wave in 1944. As German lines collapsed post-D-Day, units like the 21st Panzer Division, supported by nurses and signal staff, were overrun. On July 15, 1944, near Caen, U.S. forces encircled a field hospital where Hoffmann and 22 others worked. Outnumbered and low on supplies, they surrendered after a brief standoff. The U.S. 1st Infantry Division, adhering to Geneva protocols, processed them swiftly. Weapons confiscated, identities verified, and women separated from male prisoners to prevent harassment. Unlike male POWs, who faced immediate tactical interrogations, women were questioned lightly, as they held no strategic secrets. By August 1944, over 500 female auxiliaries were among the 50,000 Germans captured in Normandy, a fraction of the total 378,000 German POWs in U.S. custody by 1945. Their transfer to America was logistical, not punitive, designed to alleviate strain on European holding camps and utilize U.S. resources for secure internment. The efficiency of American logistics stunned the German women. In Germany, war had crippled infrastructure, roads bombed, railways destroyed, supplies scarce. In contrast, the U.S. operated a vast mechanized system. Troop ships like the SS West Point, which carried Hoffmann's group in September 1944, were marvels of organization, ferrying thousands across the Atlantic with precision. Upon arrival, trains moved prisoners to camps like Clinton with clockwork efficiency, covering hundreds of miles in days. The camps themselves, built with prefabricated barracks, had electricity, running water, and stocked kitchens, luxuries unimaginable in wartime Germany. A 1945 War Department report detailed how Camp Clinton processed 3,000 prisoners, including women, with standardized rations and medical care. To the auxiliaries, this technological prowess suggested an enemy far stronger than propaganda admitted. One prisoner, A signals operator later wrote, "Their machines never stopped. Their abundance mocked our defeat." This glimpse of America's industrial might began reshaping their understanding of the war's outcome. American camp commanders balanced discipline with humanity, guided by the Geneva Convention and strategic goals. At Camp Clinton, Colonel James Thompson oversaw 3,000 prisoners, including a small female contingent. His orders, detailed in 1945 War Department memos, emphasized fair treatment to counter Nazi propaganda and encourage defections. Guards, often young recruits from rural Mississippi, were trained to maintain order without aggression. Female POWs, like Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffmann, noted the contrast. German officers demanded rigid obedience, while American guards used calm authority, addressing prisoners by rank or name. This approach wasn't universal. Isolated reports of harsh discipline surfaced, but Red Cross inspections praised camps for compliance. Thompson allowed cultural activities, like German-language newspapers, to ease tensions. For the women, this leniency was disorienting, challenging their view of Americans as ruthless. Some, fiercely loyal, resisted. Others began to see their captors as human, a shift that would deepen during city visits. Supervised outings to cities like Jackson exposed the women to American civilians, a stark departure from their isolated camp life. On one documented trip in May 1945, 15 female POWs, escorted by military police, visited Jackson's downtown. Expecting hostility, they were met with curiosity. Shopkeepers offered smiles. Children waved. A local newspaper, the Jackson Clarion Ledger, noted residents' surprise at seeing neatly dressed German women browsing stores. The auxiliaries, issued civilian dresses to avoid attention, marveled at stocked shelves, canned goods, fresh fruit, clothing, abundance unseen in Germany since 1939. One nurse recalled a woman offering her coffee, a gesture that felt like a betrayal of her wartime loyalty yet stirred warmth. These encounters, though brief, humanized the enemy. Civilians, unaware of the women's propaganda-fueled fears, saw them as curiosities, not threats. This disconnect eroded the auxiliaries' preconceptions, planting doubts about the Reich's narratives. The women's shock at American treatment stood in stark contrast to the war's moral landscape. In Europe, Nazi atrocities, mass executions, concentration camps, forced labor, defined the Reich's brutality. The auxiliaries, though not directly complicit, were steeped in a regime that normalized such acts. Capture by Americans introduced a moral dissonance. The U.S. adhered to Geneva rules, providing food, shelter, and medical care, while Germany's treatment of Soviet POWs, for instance, was barbaric. Millions starved or died in camps. A 1945 report by the International Red Cross highlighted that female POWs in U.S. camps received dental care and rest days, unthinkable for prisoners in German hands. For women like Hoffmann, this contrast sparked private reflection. Some clung to Nazi ideology, dismissing American kindness as propaganda. Others questioned the moral cost of their loyalty. These outings to American cities would crystallize this tension, forcing them to confront the war's broader truths. May 1945, Jackson, Mississippi. The bus carrying Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffmann and 14 other Wehrmacht Helferinnen rumbled through Camp Clinton's gates, flanked by 2 military police jeeps. The women sat in tense silence, hands folded tightly, expecting a staged spectacle to humiliate them. Nazi propaganda had warned of American cruelty, public mockery, or worse. Instead, they wore civilian dresses, provided by the camp, their uniforms left behind to avoid drawing attention. The road stretched past cotton fields, untouched by the bombs that had leveled their hometowns. As the bus entered Jackson, the women's eyes widened. Brick buildings lined clean streets. Cars moved in orderly streams, and pedestrians strolled without fear. Shops brimmed with goods, shoes, fabrics, canned foods, stacked in windows. a stark contrast to Germany's empty shelves. Hoffmann, clutching a borrowed handbag, stared at a bakery's display of fresh bread, a sight she hadn't seen since 1941. The military police, led by Sergeant William Carter, maintained a loose but vigilant watch. Their orders, detailed in a May 3, 1945, War Department memo, were clear. Ensure safety, prevent escapes, and allow limited interaction to showcase American life. The women were guided through downtown, permitted to browse stores under supervision. At a Woolworth's counter, a clerk offered them Coca-Cola, a drink unknown in wartime Germany. Some refused, loyal to the Reich's warnings of poisoned enemy gifts. Others, like Hoffmann, hesitated but sipped, the cold sweetness a jolt to their senses. A 1945 report from Camp Clinton noted that these outings, though rare, aimed to demonstrate democratic prosperity to prisoners, particularly those wavering in their allegiance. The women's shock deepened as they walked past a movie theater, its marquee advertising "Meet Me" in St. Louis. Civilians glanced curiously but without hostility, some nodding politely. For auxiliaries raised on tales of American savagery, this civility was unnerving. One nurse, 22-year-old Anna Weber, later wrote in a smuggled diary, "No one spat at us, no chains, only people living as if the war was a dream." The absence of fear in Jackson's streets, children playing, women shopping, men laughing, clashed with their memories of air raid sirens and rubble. Hoffmann, trained to expect brutality, felt her resolve waver. The city's vitality, untouched by war's scars, suggested a power Germany could never match. This wasn't just a visit. It was a confrontation with a reality that challenged everything they'd been taught. The tension built as the day unfolded. Each step through Jackson streets peeled away layers of propaganda, exposing the women to a world that defied their expectations. Yet the true weight of this moment, their internal reckoning, was still to come, as personal encounters and private reflections would push their beliefs to the breaking point. The streets of Jackson pulsed with life, each sight a hammer blow to the Wehrmacht Helferinnen's world view. Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffmann, walking under the watchful eyes of Sergeant Carter's military police, passed a department store window displaying dresses in vibrant colors, luxuries unseen in Germany's austerity. The group paused at a diner, where the smell of frying burgers and coffee wafted out. On May 12, 1945, this stop was deliberate, noted in Camp Clinton's logs as a chance for prisoners to observe American normalcy. A waitress, unaware of their status, offered a smile and asked if they'd like water. Hoffmann, fluent enough in English from her training, murmured a reply, her voice catching. The gesture, simple, human, clashed with years of propaganda, warning of American malice. Another auxiliary, signals operator Clara Schmidt, stared at the diner's patrons, families eating, laughing, untouched by the war's shadow. Her hands trembled, gripping the glass, as she whispered to a companion, "This cannot be real." The women's reactions varied, splitting along lines of loyalty and doubt. Some, like 19-year-old nurse Marta Braun, clung to Nazi ideology, interpreting the abundance as a trick to weaken their resolve. Others, like Hoffmann, felt cracks forming in their beliefs. A pivotal moment came when the group entered a small bookstore. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Margaret Ellis, noticed their accents and asked, through an interpreter, about their hometowns. Hoffmann, hesitating, mentioned Hamburg, its ports bombed to ruins. Ellis, unaware of their POW status, spoke of her cousin stationed in Europe, expressing hope for peace. This exchange, recorded in a 1945 Red Cross report, left Hoffmann silent, her mind reeling. The enemy wasn't a monster, but a woman with a family, living in a world untouched by destruction. The Outings climax hit as the women boarded the bus to return to Camp Clinton. A young boy, no older than 10, waved at them from the sidewalk, his grin wide and guileless. For Hoffman, this was the breaking point. Her diary, later recovered, described the moment. He saw us not as enemies, but as people. I felt my heart betray me. The realization that America's strength lay not just in its wealth, but in its humanity, shattered her propaganda-fueled certainties. Others shared her turmoil. Anna Weber's diary noted, "We were told they'd chain us, but they gave us freedom to see their world." The ride back was quiet, each woman grappling with the weight of what they'd witnessed. For some, loyalty to the Reich held firm. For others, the seeds of doubt took root, promising to reshape their futures. This turning point, born in Jackson's bustling streets, marked a profound shift. The women's exposure to American life didn't just challenge their beliefs. It set the course for their lives after captivity, influencing how they'd return to a defeated Germany. The bus ride back to Camp Clinton on May 12, 1945, was silent, the Wehrmacht Helferinnen lost in thought. Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffmann stared out the window, the image of Jackson's vibrant streets clashing with memories of Hamburg's ruins. The supervised outing, one of several documented in War Department records, had shifted something fundamental. For many, like Hoffmann, the exposure to American life, its abundance, civility, and freedom, eroded the Nazi propaganda that had framed their worldview. Back at camp, routines resumed: roll calls, laundry duties, and farm work. Yet the women's interactions changed subtly. Red Cross reports from June 1945 noted increased discussions among female POWs about America's strength, with some openly questioning Germany's chances. Others, like Martha Braun, doubled down on loyalty, dismissing the outings as staged propaganda. Tensions rose in the barracks, with arguments flaring over whether to trust their captors' kindness. Camp life reflected broader shifts. The U.S. War Department, aiming to weaken enemy morale, encouraged activities like film screenings and English lessons, which some women, including Hoffmann, attended. A Camp Clinton log from July 1945 recorded 12 female POWs requesting books on American history, a sign of curiosity sparked by their city visits. The labor program continued, with women earning scrip for tasks like sewing or harvesting, but their work now carried a new perspective. Anna Weber, a nurse, wrote in her diary, "I pick cotton under their sun, but it feels less like punishment now." The absence of brutality, coupled with glimpses of American prosperity, softened some prisoners' defiance, though others clung to the Reich's ideals, awaiting repatriation. Repatriation loomed as Germany's surrender on May 8, 1945, marked the war's end in Europe. By late 1945, the U.S. held 378,000 German POWs, including fewer than 1,000 women. Planning began to return them to Europe, but the process was slow. Ships were needed for returning GIs, and Germany's infrastructure was shattered. The women faced uncertainty. Would they return to a homeland in chaos, or remain longer in America's strange abundance? For Hoffmann and others, the city outings had planted questions about rebuilding their lives in a defeated nation, where the ideals they'd served were collapsing under the weight of reality. As 1945 drew to a close, the Wehrmacht Helferinnen faced the reality of a defeated Germany. The supervised outings to American cities, like the May 1945 visit to Jackson, left lasting marks. Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffmann and others carried memories of bustling streets and civilian kindness back to Camp Clinton, where barracks discussions grew heated. A 1946 U.S. Army report noted that female POWs, unlike many male counterparts, showed notable shifts in attitude after such exposures, with some expressing disillusionment with Nazi ideology. By early 1946, repatriation began. Hoffmann's group boarded a troop ship in March, landing in Bremerhaven to a Germany unrecognizable, cities reduced to rubble, civilians starving, and Allied occupation forces in control. The contrast with America's prosperity haunted them. Hoffman's post-war letters, archived in Hamburg, reveal her struggle. "I saw their world, untouched. Ours is gone." Statistically, the U.S. processed 378,000 German POWs, with female auxiliaries, fewer than 1,000, representing a unique subset. The War Department's POW program, costing $1.2 billion by 1946, was deemed a success, with Red Cross inspections praising humane conditions. The women's labor, sewing, farming, contributed marginally to the U.S. economy, but their city visits had a deeper impact, softening anti-American sentiment. Some, like Anna Weber, returned to Germany questioning the Reich's moral failings, influencing family and community views. Others, like Martha Braun, remained defiant, joining underground networks loyal to Nazi ideals, though these were a minority. The broader legacy was subtle but significant. The women's experiences, documented in diaries and post-war interviews, highlighted the power of cultural exposure in reshaping perceptions. For the U.S., the program reinforced its image as a humane victor, countering Soviet narratives. For Germany, returning POWs like Hoffman faced a divided society, grappling with guilt and reconstruction. Their glimpses of America, free of chains, rich in possibility, became a quiet catalyst, urging some to embrace a new future, while others clung to a broken past. The story of the Wehrmacht Helferinnen, German women, POWs who glimpsed American cities without chains, is a quiet but profound chapter of World War II. On to their journey from the rubble of Europe to the vibrant streets of Jackson, Mississippi, reveals the power of human connection in the shadow of conflict. These women, raised on propaganda that painted their captors as monsters, encountered instead a nation of abundance and civility. The absence of cruelty, the simple gestures of kindness, a child's wave, a shared coffee, challenged their deepest beliefs. It was not just a clash of ideologies, but a mirror held up to the cost of war's divisions. Lieutenant Ingrid Hoffman's diary, with its raw admission of a heart betrayed by humanity, speaks to this unraveling. This episode, small against the war's vast canvas, underscores a truth. Even in humanity's darkest moments, empathy can pierce through. The American decision to show these women their world, unbound, was not just strategic. It was a testament to the belief that understanding can mend what war breaks. For some, like Hoffman, it sparked a painful but necessary reckoning, shaping how they faced a broken Germany. For history, it reminds us that wars end not just in treaties, but in the slow, personal work of seeing the enemy as human. These women's shock at America's freedom lingers as a lesson. In the ruins of conflict, the seeds of reconciliation are sown in moments of unexpected grace.